I'm ready anytime you are.
Oh, we are ready to go. Goodness, I guess I was just waiting for more and more people to join us. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we today? This afternoon, looking forward to a nice long evening walk on the beach. But for now, let's get started. My name is Linda Robinson, and our speaker today is a volunteer. The best way to thank them would be to provide honest and useful feedback with the session evaluation. At the conclusion of our session today, that will be launched into chat. You can click that link and provide feedback to our speaker. If you miss it, don't worry, you'll get an email at the conclusion of Blaze, and you can do it tomorrow over coffee. If you're not speaking, please remember to keep yourself on mute to avoid background noise. That's your background noise annoying us. We have a fun and interactive session planned, and if you want to see the speaker and make the presentation smaller, in other words, see more of the face and less of the presentation, you want to drag the speaker window left from your perspective in your computer. Drag it left, you'll get a bigger face. It's all on your side. Let me introduce the speaker. Our speaker today is Lance Webster, Toastmaster District 52's director in 2016 and 2017. He is a distinguished Toastmaster, a member of his district's Distinguished Speakers Bureau, and has been a Toastmaster for 23 years. In that time, he has served in every club officer role, sponsored 3 clubs, mentored 4 clubs, including one in Pune, India. He has taught public speaking as a full-time instructor at the University of Baltimore and created speech courses for UCLA's Journalism and PR Extension program and for Pepperdine's Business School seniors. He is currently a member of District 52's Wine and Dine Toastmasters and Studio City Speakers, a club he founded 13 years ago. He is also an active member and educational coach for Yangon Toastmasters in Myanmar, District 97. All 3 clubs finished the year as President's Distinguished. Nicely done. Lance has spent his career in broadcast advertising, promotion, and publicity, and co-authored and edited the only college and professional textbook on the subject. I am sure that's available on Amazon. He spent the 1970s and 1990s working for PR for the PBS television network and has worked in association management as head of several industry PR associations. He has also worked for and served on the boards of 2 Hollywood-based environmental associations, helping craft environmental messages that have reached 1 billion, that's with a B for boy, people worldwide. He has also been a life coach, a corporate and executive media trainer. And if he hadn't done enough, he has been selling real estate for Keller Williams. Let us give Mr. Lance Webster a rousing applause and welcome. Thank you.
Linda, thank you for that delightful and beautifully written introduction. Of course, I wrote it myself, which a speaker should always do. I'm delighted to be with you all today, although it is a challenge for me to be on the same agenda with my good friend Maurice Domino. We both belong to Wine and Dine Toastmasters Club here in LA, the club which he branded as the Seriously Fun Club, and I, following him as president, branded as the club for winners and leaders in District 52. So we often compete for the best speaker role in our club. He was talking to you about leadership. I'm going to be talking to you about public speaking. And my introduction told you that I started, my first job out of college was teaching public speaking in college, excuse me, at the University of Baltimore, where for 3 years, day and night, I listened to and had to immediately evaluate, I would estimate about 3,000 speeches. And I want to tell you a little story about what can really give you focus. My first day of teaching, and that was the first day that I'd ever been in front of an audience, because I had been trained as a speech teacher by sitting in a speech class my senior year in college and watching somebody teach speech, and then they dumped me into a classroom. So I went through 5 classes, and then in the evening class, beginning to feel a little bit comfortable. The evening class was a more adult class. It was one of those theaters like an operating room. And I walked in, and there was this wall of people facing me, and sitting right in the center of the front row was my father, who had flown down from New York, unbeknownst to me, to sit in the front row and sit there smiling to see how his son was doing in his first speech. That's intimidating. But I made it through that, and if I made it through that, I figured I could make it through anything, and I spent the next 3 years teaching. Pepperdine University recently called me, knowing that I'd been a district director, and asked me if I would create a public speaking course for them, and I said, sure, what do you want? And they said, we don't know. It's a graduate business students, or senior business students, and you tell us what they need. So that's kind of where I'm starting with my talk today. And to do that, I'm going to start my screen sharing here and tell you what I told them, which was, get this on here. Okay, let's back up one slide. In my 50 years of experience, I told them, most speakers don't clearly know what it is they're trying to say, or they don't know how to say it. So I told them I wanted to create a simple formula that would lead them through the process. And I drew on materials that I developed in Toastmasters, and I created a course called The Central Idea and Beyond. And as we get through my talk today, you'll begin to see what I mean by that. But you came here to hear me talk about how to capture the audience's heart. And what I'm going to say back to you is that there are 6 components which will run through my speech, but they're not the main points. But these are the components of capturing the audience's heart. You need to be relevant, you need to be clear, you need to be structured, you need to be simple, you need to use emotions, and it helps a great deal if you use humor. So, what I always tell people who are watching my talks online is you got a great opportunity to do a quick screen capture here, and you might want to do that. But this is something that I have taped on my walls around me here to make sure that I remember these things when I'm talking. So this is relevant to you. This conversation is relevant to you because you want to be a better speaker and you want to be able to capture the audience's heart. The simple formula that I use is in a speech creation workshop, which I have not given to you yet, but I'll put in the chat box at the end of this speech to make sure that you stay with me until the end. And there's also an instruction sheet that goes with it. Now, I'm calling this How to Prepare a Good Speech in 7 Easy Steps. If I have to give this talk, let me back up one. If I have to give this talk in a 5 to 7 minute speech, it's Lance's 3 easy steps. And if I've got a 6-week course, it's Lance's 12 easy steps. But today we're going to use Lance's 7 easy steps, more or less. And I'm not actually even going to number the steps. We're just going to talk about them. And we're going to talk about them in a metaphor or an analogy, and that is of building a house. So if you're going to build a house, you start with a good foundation, and we'll talk about how you do that. After the foundation, you have to have a solid framework for your house. Otherwise, it'll fall down. It won't work. After that, you add all the important details that make the house beautiful, comfortable, everything that you want it to be. Then you invite people in. That's called the introduction in a speech. And eventually you have to say goodbye. That's called the conclusion at the end of a speech. And that's the order in which I prepare a speech. I don't start, as many people do, with, hey, I have a great idea on how to start my speech. Well, I know I'll say X or Y and that'll wake them up or whatever. No, you don't start with that. You start with understanding the basic structure of a speech, which is, and by the way, when you know a rule, you can always break it if you have a reason to. But the introduction the beginning of your speech, which we call the introduction, should be about 10%, the body about 85%, and the conclusion or the ending, I prefer to call it an ending really, is about 5%. Now in a 5 to 7 minute speech, how much is that? That's about 40 seconds for the introduction, about 6 minutes for the body, and about 20 seconds for the ending. So that if you work from that structure, you can expand or contract or change those a little bit. If it's a 3-minute speech, you do the math. If it's a 2-minute table topics, you can do the math. If it's a 1-hour speech, you're going to have a lot more time for the introduction, for setting the stage, and for doing the things that the beginning needs to do. We will get to the introduction and the conclusion later in this talk today. But the main thing that you need to know is that you start with the foundation, okay? And the foundation means you need to know for sure, and you need to think about, and you need to give attention, pay attention to the audience, the topic, and the purpose of your speech. So let's talk first about let's talk about all three of these together. There are several ways you can look at this. You can first, it depends on the situation, and you have to analyze each situation and see what's relevant. But the main emphasis may be on who you're talking to, and then you worry about what you're talking, why you're talking to them, and what you're talking about. Or there can be a different order. You can say that what's really important is what I have to say, and what do you want done, and to whom are you speaking. So this is another way of thinking about it. And another way is to think about the purpose first. What do you want to happen? Do you want the audience to do something? Do you want to think a particular way? Do you want to change their opinions? Any of these things. But there are three different elements here, and you do need to think about all three. Okay? Then what is it you know about the audience? Let's talk about them for a moment. Is it a friendly audience or a hostile audience? That's going to condition how you approach them. If it's a friendly audience, you don't have to do much to get them to be friendly, to get them to want to hear you. If they know about you, if they like you, they've come to learn from you. If it's a controversial topic and you're going to possibly be on the opposite side from some people, these are things you need to think about in advance. And if you want to get into a lot more detail on this, take one of my 6-week courses. Next, are they knowledgeable about the subject you're going to speak about or not? It's okay to speak to a subject, speak to an audience that's not knowledgeable about your subject if you are prepared to bring them along in the appropriate sequence to build their knowledge and help them learn and grow. And are they interested in your topic? And you really need to make sure that they are interested in your topic. Let's talk for a moment about purpose, because this is part of this opening group of things you have to worry about. Are you there to primarily present information? This might often happen in a business setting. Are you there to persuade? This might, you may be dealing with community or political issues, or trying to get people to buy a house or whatever. Persuading means getting people to either do something or change their mind. And actually, doing something is more in the motivation vein. Are you there to entertain them, to make them laugh? You really don't need them to remember anything, but you want them to enjoy the evening after dinner. That's a possibility. Usually people want to work in some kind of message, because we like to think that our speeches have an impact of some kind on people. So persuade really means get them to change their mind about something. Motivate means really to get them to do something, to buy something, to vote a particular way, and so forth. Or are you there to inspire people? And what that basically means is to raise them to a higher level of being, to make them think more highly of themselves, to make them feel challenged to move ahead in their lives. So what purpose do you have? You really can't prepare a speech unless you know the audience, unless you have a purpose, and unless you're prepared to do this thinking beforehand, do all this work. Is the topic, for example, familiar to them? Is it new? Is it of interest? If it's not familiar, you need to explain it. If it's familiar, you don't need to explain it, But if it's new, you do need to explain it. And if it's something that you want them to be interested in, you need to really get them to see what is of value to them in listening to you. You answer the question, I'm getting ahead of myself. You answer the question, what's in it for me? And I think some of you know there's a phrase, what's in it for me? Whiff 'em. What's in it for me is what you have to get them to understand. Whiff 'em. Okay. So that's the foundation. The audience, the purpose, and the topic. And once you've settled on these three things, then the next step, and it's a very important step, is to begin work on the framework for your speech. Here's the elements of framework. You start with a central idea, and I'm going to go into that in a lot more detail in a moment. Then your main points, and in the process of developing your main points, you'll figure out what form of organization you want to need. Then you build the support material. And building a house, that would be after you've done the framework, you build all the walls and the roof, and then you work on transitions to go from one main point to another. I've heard so many speeches where people don't transition effectively, and there are ways to do that, which we'll talk about. So let's look at this thing called a central idea. Your subject, you start with a topic. It's what you want to talk about. And then you narrow it down to, if I'm going to talk about, for example, where's my list of topics here? If I want to talk about my summer vacation, I could talk for hours about my summer vacation. If I want to talk about the value of a library, because I love libraries. As a matter of fact, just before I came online here, I was over at the North Hollywood Library helping them with their book sale today. There are many things I could tell you about the value of a library. If I want to talk about Toastmasters International, I could go on for hours, and have from time to time. So you need to narrow down the topic, and you do that by creating a central idea. The central idea provides your subject, your topic, with direction and purpose. And there's some rules for a central idea that if you follow them, it's going to work real well. It's the single most important element of any speech, and it is the thing most missing in all those 3,000 speeches that I had to evaluate in colleges and the 2,000 speeches I've had to evaluate in 20 years as a Toastmaster. The single most missing element has been the central idea. Another way of saying it is the speaker didn't really know what it was they were trying to get across. So when you can create a powerful, effective central idea, you've gone maybe 25, 30% of the way toward having a speech that the audience will appreciate. And you're being a speaker that they'll want to hear again. Now, what is it that makes a central idea? These are elements that I say are important. It needs to be a complete sentence, a coherent thought. Everything that follows in your speech needs to fit under that umbrella, okay? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. For example, if I were giving a speech about my summer vacation, or my winter vacation, or my last vacation, or whatever, I might say, my summer vacation, everything that could go wrong did. That's a simple sentence, and it tells you where I'm going, and it's a coherent thought, it's memorable, and everything that I say after that has to be about what went wrong with my vacation, okay? Or maybe if I'm talking about the path to success, okay? Maybe there are many central ideas, by the way. You could have thousands of central ideas for any one topic. But the central idea that I might choose would be for my path to success is my road to success had avoidable pitfalls. Okay, so if I'm going to talk about, if that's the approach I'm going to take, then my main points will be various pitfalls and how I overcame them. If I'm going to talk about the value of a library, my central idea might be libraries are keys to learning. Now, what does that mean? I don't know, but I got to explain it, and I got to have at least 3 main points in a 5 to 7 minute speech, or 5 main points in a 20-minute speech that explain to you why libraries are the key to learning. But you see, libraries are the key to learning is a simple, memorable sentence. If I were going to talk about Toastmasters International or Toastmasters, I could say the central idea is Toastmasters teaches public speaking and leadership. Okay, now that's narrowed it down. I'm not going to talk about clubs. I'm not going to talk about a lot. I'm going to talk about the specifics of public speaking and leadership and what we do to make that happen. If my topic were, excuse me, world trouble spots. Okay, there's a big one. I could go on about that for about 2 or 3 hours right now, even without doing notes. But let's narrow it down to a memorable central idea. The central idea might be something like, the world is in trouble and you can help. Okay, now I've got to come up with 3, 4, or 5 ways that you can help and explain what they are and how they work. So you see how the central idea leads you to the next part, which is the main points. But before we do that, this is, we get the main points. Generally, you don't want more than 5 main points in a speech. If it's a 1-hour speech and it's a specific subject for people who are very interested, you might have more. If it's a 5 to 7 minute speech, I strongly recommend no more than 3 or 4 main points, because you want people to remember things. And if you state the main points at the beginning, we'll talk about this later, at the beginning, in the middle during transitions, and at the end, there's a chance they might remember 3 main points and your central idea. And the central idea in their minds may well unlock those main points that you gave if you keep the main points simple. So keep them like mini central ideas under the main central idea. Complete sentence, simple sentence. Next comes, how are we going to organize these main points? And there, I'm sure you all know, there are a number of different ways to organize main points, chronologically or by time, geographically or by space, importance or reverse importance, what's most important first, or maybe what's least important first, and you build to what's most important. That's a good way to do it, because people tend to remember things that come later in a speech. Or in persuasive speaking, you often present the problem first and then the solution. Maybe there are many solutions, but you're presenting yours, right? If, for example, I was going to give you a speech about where I went to college. I went to 4 colleges, took 4 colleges to get me graduated, but I could talk about them in terms of chronology. University of Virginia, Boston University, American University, University of Maryland. That's chronology. Or geographically, I could go north to south or south to north. Let's say north to south. Boston University, Maryland University, American University, University of Virginia. Or order of importance. I think that the most important school I went to was the one that gave me a foundation in trust and in honor and in being and in integrity. And that would be the University of Virginia, the one that I only went to for 2 years and flunked out of because I was spending too much time at the fraternity. Okay, but I learned some critical lessons that stood me all through my life in that one. And I can then talk about each of them, or I could start with the other universities and then build up to that one. Okay, or I could talk about the problem of trying to decide which college to go to. That's another matter. But there's another important way to organize a speech, and that's storytelling. So, Maurice is brilliant about this, Maurice Domino, and I've also learned a lot from Lance Miller, who was the, I think, 2005 world champion speaker, who's in our district and often speaks on storytelling. And then we've had world champion storytellers speak to our district. You probably have too. But when you're telling a story in a speech, it's more all a chronology, but you start by setting the scene, which is when something happened, where it happened, who was involved, the conflict or the challenge or the problem. And then you move on to build drama and suspense, usually by failed attempts to make things happen. And then there's a hero who solves the problem, the principal character. So this is a way to storytell, and you can talk about the main character, or you can make yourself the main character. In either case, you should act out, use movements, gestures, expressions to act out a story when you're storytelling. Here's a couple of examples of that. There's a wonderful woman in our district named Sarah, who was in a speech contest about 5 years ago, and I was in the back of the room with my camera, and she was so expressive that I snapped pictures. This is about 1/3 of the pictures I took in a 7-minute speech. And you see, if you were closer, you could see expressions on her face, but you can see movement and gesture. Boy, did she keep the audience's attention. And here's a guy named Tom who gave a speech, gave a speech. You can tell, what he was talking about in that last picture. He was talking about firing a gun. Well, his acting out the situations that he was involved in kept our attention riveted to him. So if you want to, again, we're talking about what are the things you do and how do you construct a speech, and what are the things you do to really keep the audience tuned into you, listening to you, enjoying you, perhaps learning from you. So that's storytelling. So we're in the body of the speech now, and we have main points, we have transitions, and we have support material. So let's talk about main points. Each main point is in effect a mini speech. Then we have to support each main point. And we do that with what we call in the speech teaching business support material. And there are all kinds of support material. And I usually recommend that when you have a main point, an assertion, which is supporting your central idea, or helping explain or expound on your central idea, it is a simple assertion. You need to prove it. And when I do media training, when I'm working with corporate executives or celebrities and so forth about how to get across a point that they want to get across, I have to teach them how not necessarily to answer the questions they were asked, but to come prepared with what they want to say. And one of the reasons that communication is difficult in our culture is because people don't necessarily believe you. Credibility is a huge problem in our culture. And to be credible, you need to have effective support for your assertions, for your main points, and for your central idea. And so facts, figures, and statistics are a good way to make your point. But they can be boring. So you add other things, maybe testimony from people. If you're watching the January 6th hearings in the House of Representatives, they are supporting their assertions by bringing in people to testify. Testimony is very effective, assuming the person who's testifying is believable. Quotes, no matter what you want to speak about, online and in books of quotations, you can find quotes by famous, believable, trustworthy people. Then there are anecdotes. Anecdotes are little stories, and a little story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but is used to support your main point. Very powerful. That's one of the most powerful forms of support material. People also use analogies, metaphors, similes. I'm using those in talking about public speaking as if we were constructing a house. That's an analogy. It's something that's like something. Comparisons, contrast. You show how things are the same as something else or how things are different from something else. This is a form of support material. And you may have visual aids, props, or demonstrations. All of these are forms of support material. So when you have your three main points, my recommendation is that you pick three different kinds of support material to support each main point. And I recommend that you start with a few simple facts and figures or statistics, because that catches people's attention. But then you add some testimony or a little story or one of these other methods. And what you're going to do is you're bringing the audience along in the area of credibility and in the area of clarity and in the area of understanding. Now remember, we started out with 6 components that you want to work into your speech. Relevance. So you do that in the beginning by telling people why they need to listen, why it's important. And you can remind them of the relevance as you go through any of your main points. Clarity. Clarity basically means simplicity. It means keeping things simple so that people can hear, keeping your sentences simple. Another way to enhance clarity is through 2 invaluable speaker tools: repetition and restatement. Repetition is saying the same thing in exactly the same words. I'll say that again. Repetition is saying the same thing in exactly the same words. Restatement is saying things in different words. I might put it a different way. I might say, if you want to restate something, you come up with another way of saying it. So there I've just used different words. Okay. Those are invaluable for clarity. We've already talked about structure in your speech. I'm again and again and again, I'm talking about simplicity, and also important is emotion. How did it make you feel? How did something that happened make somebody else feel? When you can express your feelings. I was watching somebody on television the other day who, and I even forget the circumstance, but I looked up from my computer to the television set, which is up there, when he started to cry. This was a policeman, I think. And whatever the circumstance was, he had to pause and catch his emotions and get them under control. And boy, that was powerful. That made me look up, it made me listen, it made me pay attention. And of course there's humor, and humor is kind of difficult. You need to make sure that you practice humor, keep humor simple, clean, decent, and there are different ways to develop humor. Comparison and contrast, relevant, relate to the audience and its knowledge of situations. I'll tell you one thing that got a big laugh for me. I was doing a media training speech to the organization of Southern California city managers. Okay, there was about 200 city managers from cities throughout Southern California. And I got there early and I started talking to some of these city managers, and I said over and again, I said, what's the biggest problem you have as a city manager? I gathered information, and when I started to speak, I said to the audience, fortunately I was able to chat with some of you beforehand, and I asked what was the biggest problem you had. You would be amazed how many of you privately told me that the biggest problem you have as a city manager is that your mayor is having an affair outside of his marriage and you're afraid people will find out about it. That got a huge laugh from the audience. It was relevant to their situation. It kind of broke the ice, and they loved me for that speech, because then I had to tell them how they can avoid answering that question, which was the topic of media training. Transitions. When you go from one main point to the next, there are two things you should do. First, you should make it abundantly clear that you are going from one main point to the next. And secondly, you can use it to make an internal summary, which means you are repeating your main points. So we have been talking about our first main point. Now let's move on to our second main point. That's the simple and obvious and direct way to do it. And it sounds formulaic, and it is, and I promise you audiences love it. They love it because they know you have only 3 main points, and when you're finished with number 2 and you tell them you're moving to number 3, they don't have to look at their watch. They know you're getting close to the end of the speech, and that's useful to them, unless they love you, and then maybe they want more. The internal summary would be, okay, we have been talking about X. Now let's move on and talk about Y. Fill in X and Y with the actual main point. So we've been talking about main point number 1, blah, 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 blah. Now let's move on to our second main point, blah, 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 blah. And we've been talking about main point number 1 and number 2. This is when you're going from 2 to 3. Now let's talk about main point number 3, and you spell it out. The more times you do that, the more times you repeat those main points, and they're simple sentences, the better the possibility, the more the possibility that you're going to get them to remember those main points. Okay, so we've gotten through the speech. We've related it to our audience. We've had our main points. So let's go back and work on the introduction, the first 40 seconds if it's a 7-minute speech. Okay, so you want to invite people in. These are the purposes of an introduction. First, get their attention, and you usually should be able to do that in about 5 seconds. Whatever you say, a startling idea, an amazing statistic that's going to blow people's minds, a very funny, relevant line of humor. There are different ways to get their attention, but that's usually the first 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 seconds. Then you have to interest them in your topic. And the way to do that is to tell them why this speech, this topic, and your approach to it is important to them. In the process of this, you want to warm them up to like you. one of the best speeches I ever heard before I was in Toastmasters, before I was giving a lot of speeches, was by a gentleman named Jack Ioannidis, who was the motivational speaker for the Dallas Cowboys. And his job that Saturday morning in Beverly Hills in 1978 was to wake up a bunch of hungover public TV station public relations directors and get them to want to spend the day in workshops. He had 1 hour or 50-minute motivational speech, and the first 7 or 8 minutes he just warmed. We didn't know who he was from Adam. I mean, we heard the introduction, but we had to like him. And so the first couple of minutes are really important. However you get their attention, however you interest them, also get them to like you. He told some jokes about himself. He was a little bit self-deprecating in a couple of areas, and that got us to like him. So warming them up is along with these other things. But the third part is tell them what's coming. You tell them, and what's coming is your central idea and your main points. And you don't give the whole main points, you just do bullet points, like 2 or 3 words. So my central idea is going to be you build a house from the ground up. We're going to talk about foundation, structure, and all the goodies that you put inside it. That's telling them what's coming. But that's not the complete sentence for foundation, structure, and so forth. You make those into a complete sentence. Like, your house has to have a good foundation or it'll collapse. So that may be your first main point. So, and in predicting it, you say, we're going to talk about foundation. So tell them your centralized, get their attention, get them interested, tell them what's coming, and then now let's move to our first main point, which is, if your house needs a strong foundation to survive, or whatever it might be. Answer the question, what's in it for me? That's their question. Always keep that question in mind in the introduction. It's critical. The audience wants to know your central or main idea, the purpose, how it's organized, and the main points. And you don't have to use these words that are here on the screen, but you do have to make sure that they understand those things. And remember that the general topic of my speech today is about how you get the audiences to like you, how you get the audiences to appreciate you, how you get the audiences to want to hear you again next time. And so all of this is in those categories. Let's talk about saying goodbye. Let's talk about the end of the speech, okay? It's pretty simple. You summarize your main points and your central idea. And remember, in a 5 to 7 minute speech, you've got 20 seconds to do these 3 things. You summarize the main points and central idea. You tie back or refer back to whatever it is you said at the beginning to get their attention and interest in the introduction. And you remind them of any actions you want them to take, if that's appropriate. Now, I like to, however you construct these 3 elements, these are the elements in that 20-second conclusion. And I strongly recommend that your last sentence be one of 2. It either be your central idea again, or it be the action that you want them to take. You leave them with those final words. And here's another tip when you're ending a speech. When someone is leaving your house, you don't say, "Thank you for coming," right? You say something else about, I'm not sure what you would say when somebody's leaving, because it's been COVID so long, I haven't had anybody visit me. But what you do not say at the end of a speech is thank you. Unless you thank them for something specific. Now, one of the ways I thank people without saying thank you is I will say, as I will to you, thank you for being a terrific audience. Not one of you looked at your cell phones while I was talking. Something like that, right? But you can thank them if you thank them for something specific. If you just say thank you, in effect, what they're probably going to hear is, thank you for sitting through my long, boring speech. So don't say thank you. Finish your speech with your central idea. If my central idea is the world is in trouble and you can help, Mr. Toastmaster, you turn to the person who introduced you, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, John, Susan, whatever it is, when you turn your head away from the audience to the person who introduced you, they know you're finished, and the audience knows you're finished. That's the way you end a speech. Now, we have gone through Lance's 7 easy steps. Pick a familiar topic and get to know it well, and your audience and purpose and all that. Formulate a central idea, create main points, decide how they're going to be organized, plan how to support them, create a compelling introduction, create a memorable ending. There is an 8th point that is essential if you're going to have a speech that the audience appreciates and even enjoys. There is one more step, and I'm hoping that you're all wondering what it's going to be right now, and you're running through different things in your mind. But the answer is practice, practice, practice. If you don't practice a speech at least 10 times out loud, and at least 5 of those 10 times with an audience, not your dog. The dog will appreciate anything you say, not your cat. Your cat will ignore anything you say. Not your bird. Your bird, if it's a parrot, will repeat everything you say but doesn't understand it. No, practice with a human being or 2 at least half the time. And then you've got a speech. What will happen is when you're talking to a human being, you will start to use your physicality. Now, this is a whole nother speech about physicality and the elements I touched on when I was talking about humor and about movement, gesture, and expression. I showed you all those pictures of Sarah and Tom. And by the way, I did have their permission to use those pictures. I just wanted you to know that. My father was a documentary film director, and back in the 1960s, he is credited by the people who teach documentary filmmaking for inventing the extreme close-up. He would go in with a camera so that all you saw was the eyes, nose, and mouth, not the forehead, not the chin, not the body, when something was critical and when emotion was being expressed. The point is, your face, your expression, your voice, your movement, and your gesture are important elements of the audience enjoying you and your speech. I'm going to give you 2 little tips because we're getting close to the end here. And the green light is on, but I'm going to give you 2 little tips about movement that you may not have thought of. For transition, whatever transition, big transition from one main point to another, or within a main point, the transition from one support material to another, movement laterally, left or right, indicates to the audience that you are making a transition. And if you say that we're now moving on to something else and you move. Now, online, how do you do that? Very simple movements. Or if you're behind a lectern and don't have space to move out, you can just move a little bit to the left. I'm going to change my subject and I move over here. A little bit of movement like that signals to the audience that you're making a transition. So lateral movement on transitions, movement to and from the audience for importance. If I were to say to you, this now is really important, and I move a little bit closer to the camera, or you lean forward over the lectern, that's a signal to the audience that something you're saying is important. Of course, you then need to move back normal because if you're standing in front of a group, for example, in teaching, I had to do this all the time. You move a little bit forward when something is important, and if you don't move back, then something else is important, you move forward some more, and eventually you're in the back of the room behind them. So you need to make your point, move forward, and then go back to your normal place. That's just a little tip on helping the audience understand what you're saying, what you're doing. Remember, relevance, clarity, structure, simplicity, emotion, and when you can, some humor, mild humor. And that's it. So I hope this has helped you. You are probably, most of you are experienced Toastmasters. Probably most of you know most of what I've been talking about, and that's fine. But I hope you listened today through how can I work on my next speech and bring into it something that I have not given the focus or attention to. Relevance, clarity, structure, simplicity, emotion, humor. Prepare the central idea first, then the main points in the form of organization, and finally get to your introduction and your conclusion. Madam Toastmaster.
Nicely done. Thank you so much, Lance. I've been working on my humor. I look to David Moore as my mentor, and it's not easy, but I'm working on it.
Great. I'd be happy to entertain any questions if you have time, or any comments are welcome.
So does anyone have any questions? Do we have any in chat that we need to talk about?
The handouts.
Say again?
Yeah,
Can we get a
thank
copy of
you,
the
thank you,
handouts?
thank you. Let me get out of this, stop sharing here, and let's bring up the chat box. And I'm going to, for everyone, I'm going to put in the basic outline right here. Somebody open it and make sure that it opens large enough to read.
Stephen, you want to do that real quick on the speech workshop?
Yeah, let me open it up.
Or April or Daniel?
I'm opening it, and it opens for me just fine.
Okay.
So yeah,
Also,
it
just-
opens in a Word document, it's fine.
Yeah, and then here is
First
the,
sheet.
I have one more important duty. We haven't, before we leave though, I want to make sure we get any questions. You can put them in chat, raise your hand.
This
I just put a
stop
second,
here.
I put a second document,
Nice,
in,
okay.
which is the summary of the talk.
Yeah, worked for me. Okay.
Right.
All right. What I would like to see, one more. That's it. That's it. All right. I must close with this. Do not leave until I do. We hope that you enjoyed the session today. I certainly did, and I learned many things. I appreciate all of the information. To thank our speaker, please provide your feedback using the link that is in chat just prior to those attachments that Lance dropped in. And please remember to partake in the Zoom poll. Oh, you don't have to do that because this was not officer training.
Right.
But there is one more thing you could do today, and it's coming up in just a few minutes. If you need any pathways knowledge, there is a base camp management session coming up at 3:50, and you can go to the Founders District calendar, the LACE training, and get a registration link for that, even at this late hour. Do you need
And
any?
if anybody wants to put in the survey that this speech was far more interesting and valuable than Maurice Domina's, I'll appreciate that.
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting.
Just kidding. I love Maurice.
What I want to do is be able to see the pictures of the people closer up.
I gotta end the meeting, guys. Thanks, Maurice. You did an awesome job.
Stephen,
We have a hard stop.
Stephen or Linda,
Thank
before
you,
you
thank you, Lance.
Thank you
It's
so much,
wonderful.
Lance.
My pleasure.